This episode of Ars Cryptotica is brought to you by Uptick Project, the NFT world in your hand. Uptick is a decentralized mobile app built on top of the Uptick protocol. Manage your NFT-based digital assets with a focus on entertainment, sports, and the creative industry. Whatever your need for NFTs, Uptick has you covered. Henry,
Good morning.
good morning.
All right. I want to call this episode Suicide Note 1 of 2.
Mm-hmm.
Last night, I was at my fourth meeting for alcoholics in 2 days. And it's been difficult. I'm trying, to hold on right now. There's a lot of physical discomfort. There's a lot of emotional discomfort. I was 48 hours. I'll be 48 hours sober at my 12 o'clock meeting today. And while I was there, they asked me if I wanted to talk. And I really don't want to talk right now in a group full of people. But I said, the only thing I could think to say was Monday of this past week was the start of a bender leading up to the 3rd. And the 3rd is the anniversary of my brother's suicide. And I started drinking. I had 2 cases of wine that I had bought in a frenzy. I mean, I had been drinking every day, 2 bottles, maybe,
Mm-hmm.
But Monday, something snapped in me. And I started opening the bottles around, when I woke up instead of, 5, 6 o'clock at night for nightcaps and get easier to sleep.
Yeah.
So open the bottles at 9 o'clock on Monday. And from Monday, sometime between Monday and the 3rd, I blacked out. Was awake, drinking, but blacked out. I very little recollection of what transpired between the 1st and the 3rd.
Wow. I've blacked out, but not for that long.
Yeah, I blacked out. I don't have much recollection of the week. And
Yes.
it's pretty bad. And I when all was said and done, I had finished almost 17 bottles of wine in 3 days.
Wow.
And that was leading again up to the 3rd anniversary of my brother's death. And on that day, without any recollection of doing this, I made an artwork I called it Suicide Note 1 of 2, 1 to follow. And one of my collectors, apparently I spoke to, I found out all of this. He called me concerned about my mental well-being. I don't remember what I said, but whatever I said, because I haven't even really had a heart-to-heart conversation with him since, set off a chain reaction of concern. So as I mentioned, I'm living in an Airbnb. I was kicked out of my house 2 weeks ago. And so he was trying to find her number. And so he was Googling and just diving into the internet, trying to figure out how to reach her because he couldn't reach me back. Mm. And I don't exactly know the exact details of how those two connected, but they did. Took some hours and a lot of panicking on behalf of the collector, whom I definitely hurt in the process. And then my ex was contacted by the collector. The collector and the ex started brainstorming. She started sending off the Find My iPhone alarm on my phone.
Mm-hmm.
And which I don't remember any of this, but apparently she told me that she had set it off 100 times without any response. I never turned the alarm off.
Mm-hmm.
So now the worst is being confirmed in her head. She starts to panic because she doesn't know where I'm staying.
Oh,
but she knows that I'm staying at an Airbnb that's owned by an old friend and a mutual friend of my boss. So she calls my boss, who's on vacation in Florida, in a hysterical breakdown panic, saying, I think that Henry has killed himself. And do you know how I can get in touch with the owner of the Airbnb? Now, again, I don't remember any of this, but then sometime around 9 o'clock at night, I received a smashing on my, door that woke me up. Apparently, I had passed out. When I opened the door, the owner of the Airbnb was standing there with my ex on the phone, who was apparently traipsing in the snow all around the Airbnb looking for my body, again, because of something that I said. And that she had a friend with her who was knocking on doors because they didn't know which house was the Airbnb on the street. And this house is on the water, on a bay, which is really an estuary. And so that's where it cuts off. And again, I have no recollection of any of this. And I wake up on Monday morning. I'm sorry, I wake up on the 4th. Sorry, Monday morning is when it started. I wake up on the 4th. And I start to look at my phone. And I start to see a trail of dead and damage and destruction. And the things that I did, the things that I said, the people that I called in text messages was just terrifying. That what it was, there are no words, and I will not repeat on this podcast the things I said, the things I did. But I woke up alive and in a complete and utter moment of perilous bottom. And so the only thing I can do is call an old friend who was sober now for 30 years, still a kind of legend in the meeting houses of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I told him in jest what was going on, and I was so confused and so shattered I couldn't even figure out on Google where a meeting was. And he found a meeting, and I went to the meeting, and it was a complete breakdown. So the 5th at 7 o'clock at night, I had my first meeting. And I'm sorry, the 4th at 7 o'clock at night, I had my first meeting. And the thing, if I go back to a memory that I have this week, now keeping in mind that I was kicked out by my ex, which will go backwards in time to why. So you probably have some idea now. But on Monday, so I said I'm living in an Airbnb on a bay that's like a bird sanctuary. And there were swans flying, across the low over the water, over the frozen bay, I should say, but around the docks. They flush the water in, they pipe it in to keep the water from freezing around the docks, to do damage for the docks, but it also creates these natural habitats for birds in the winter. So a group of 6 swans that I had seen there several times in the previous week was flying in from another watering hole, and 5 of them landed in the water, and one of them came in at 45 miles an hour and went straight into a dock. And he flipped upside down on the dock. And he, in complete and utter distress, jumps back in the water. And an hour later, he was dead on the snow just outside of the water. And so now there were 5 swans, because swans mate for life.
Oh, yeah.
And you can imagine that in that moment, I thought, man, how awful of a symbolic similarity to my own life, that 2 swans that might have mated for life, and one was here dead on the snow, which is where she had come to find me dead on the snow because of what I did. But this was the swan dead in the snow. And so these 2 days have passed. And yesterday, before my meeting, I saw something. And now this is my around 24 hours, 30 hours sober. And then I get to this meeting last night and I tell this story. Then yesterday, before the meeting, I noticed an enormous number of swans. I had only ever seen 6. And then it turned to 5 because they live in even numbers. And now there were 20 swans, not 19 and not 21. There were 20 swans. And I thought, my God, how are there 20 swans, or not, not 19 or not 21, because clearly there should be one missing swan.
Yeah.
And I kid you not, John, I was like, whoa, what just happened? And so I look out at the bay. The body of the swan, which I had been watched, being picked at by crows and seagulls, massive body of a swan is gone. Gone. Just the flat snow is all that's there right now today. And so when they ask me, what do I want to say? Because one of the things that I find as a great struggle in my life is, reflecting on notions of God. I'm not an atheist. I'm an agnostic, and I'm an anarchist at heart. But I do have a spiritual sensibility that tickled quite insanely. I don't know exactly how to process that, or how I might process it, creatively, but I will. But that's just the only thing I could think to say last night, the meeting. But why is all of this happening? So the beginning of the problem started, as you already know this, a bit of this story, where we can go back to earlier episodes and hear why I walked away from art, why I came back to art. But over the course of 2021, the sort of inaugural year of the NFT for me, there was a moment of, perilous understanding that I needed to dive into the project of what came to be known as the Miserere. The Miserere is, it goes back to the artist Georges Rouault, a French Fauvist, a contemporary of Henri Matisse. And his work for most of his life was technicolor, being a Fauvist, and somewhat expressionistic. Very expressionistic. But he was a post-World War I, or between the wars. He experienced World War I, and that World War I experience in Europe left him, like so many other artists, shattered and grappling for some reason that if there is a God in this universe, it certainly is not looking down fairly upon man, and that if man is a reflection of the God of the universe, that this God is inherently either ignorant or apathetic to evil, etc. That these questions that the especially theologians and theologically oriented creatives in the early 20th century had to grapple with after World War I and through World War II, after World War II. And we have, as a direct result of all this carnage and senseless death, the advent of existentialism and philosophical thought, which really is, a spin-off of Husserl's phenomenology. So Rouault segues, he has a complete break from his Fauvist roots. And it's like a vision, it's a visionary break from his roots. He goes into a obsessive creation of a body of work he calls the Miserere, which is a reference to a psalm in the Bible that refers to God, this asking, this begging, this praying out of desperation, please have mercy on me, have mercy on us, have mercy on we. And the work turns to metal plate engraving in only black and white, no color. Mm-hmm. The Technicolor is gone for the series. Now, he is a devout Catholic, a blue blood Christian. And so where we have great commonality is in his central inspiration, which is the Via Crucis, the Stations of the Cross, that, process of, the failure of the people to heed this notion that the Christ, the man, could have been the Son of God, the disparities between the various religions at the time, that the, Jewish people in general, certainly the aristocracy and the leadership had no interest in acknowledging Christ as what they would have called the Meshaka or the Messiah, that the Messiah was not in their cards yet. And so this galvanized a kind of, the repercussions of the end of Christ. And this is the Stations of the Cross. So the Stations of the Cross as a theme runs throughout the Miserere of Rouault. Now, we've talked about this also in the past in an earlier podcast. My interest in the Stations of the Cross is deep. In particular, the last words of Christ on the cross is deep for me. Something that has sort of guided my whole creative life. My trip to Israel in 2014 as a sub context of that trip, which was for another art project, was a personal pilgrimage for thinking about the Stations of the Cross, and in particular, his fateful last words, my father, why have you forsaken me? And what that could possibly mean in the context of mercy, in the context of the Miserere, is one of the reasons why I was so madly in love with the Miserere of George Rouault. I have a brother, as you know, who took his life in February 3rd of 2018. My brother, his name was Christopher. Now, I know these are all just coincidences, but my brother was a tragic story. And it gets more tragic now than I knew prior to the making of the Miserere, which I'll explain. My brother was a tragic person. His name was Christopher. The name Christopher comes from Christos in the Bible, and the Christ-like figure. Saint Christopher was an attendant of Christ, which is why they called him the Saint Christopher. And my brother and I had this shared mutual love for an musical artist named Tom Waits, who had so many songs about debauchery and so many songs about living the lifestyle that my brother and I have lived, which is, you know, mostly drug addicted and drunken, you know, between recoveries and the failures and the fall offs from recovery, it's sort of been the process of our lives. Only, you know, he lived a much darker life than I did for different kinds of reasons. But I decided that I felt compelled to revision the Miserere, but through my understanding of my brother's tragic life and death. And I wanted to do that as in part to create a lens on mental health, the idea that the world of around us is in crisis. And what are some of the major themes symbolically that I could sort of discover in my brother's life and death through art? And so began that journey around June of this past year. Now, Rouault intended to make 100 plates. He had sketched out his grand, you know, masterpiece to 100 plates. And of course, he passed away before completion. He never completed the 100. His last plate was 57. And there's kind of two themes, two separate approaches to the Miserere of Rouault. He kind of broke it down into two collections that would exist in parallel. And one would be more about the apocalyptic experience of human nature at humanity's own hands. And this was sort of like the deep reference to suffering, senseless suffering of mankind at their own hand.
Because of the war.
What is that?
Right?
Yes, because of the war. And the second part of it would be that reclamation, that merciful bestowal by, you know, faith in God. And so it was that somewhere in the binary of those two ideas, one the suffering and the other the mercy, he eked out what became a kind of blueprint, early blueprint for existential inquiry in art. I mean, around the same time, this is around the same time that, you know, Sartre is reading Husserl, and you know, and Camus is reading Sartre, and, you know, these prime, you know, they're all reading Heidegger, and you're getting this sort of whirlwind deep dive into a new way of thinking about humanity in the absence of a moral God. You know, and Nietzsche laid that out with the death of God, and thus spake Zarathustra, and many other texts. But that death of God in Nietzsche is not the death of the possibility of God across all eternity, or like infamously, he meant that in an immoral world, in a morally broken world, in a world without moral integrity, that the notion of the God of the Bible cannot exist, doesn't exist, is useless, and therefore God is dead, that God. And man has killed him by his immorality, by his choices, by his pushing the world to the brink of destruction, by the senseless death and the suffering. So all this happens around it. So as a blueprint for the existentialist inquiry into human psychology and an experiential reality, and this is where, you know, phenomenology comes into it. What is phenomenology? Is what is the experience of everything as it is in the moment, right? In the moment, what is the life experience of the thing, whether we're talking about a cup of coffee or the experience of, you know, bomb, a firebombing raid on Guernica, in Spain. This is all coming together around the Miserere. And I am an existentialist at heart, an agnostic, so bordering on theological existentialist, but because I don't aspire to incorporate any textual basis for my thought, outside of philosophical inquiry, it's hard for me to say, I can't say I'm an atheist, let's put it that way. But this is the background that pushes me into the Miserere. And what I didn't realize at the beginning of making this, starting this project, Miserere, was to what depths it was going to drag me into my own personal hell, because the exploration of his life was in part a reflection on my own, and a sort of parallel exploration of my own failures, and the psychological sort of tremoring began with the beginning of the Miserere collection, and so did the very rapid increase in alcohol consumption. Now, I am an alcoholic, have always been a functioning alcoholic who lied to himself enough, to keep drinking, but to drink just so much that I could sleep, let's say, and get up and go to work the next day. But nevertheless, a daily 2-bottle of wine drinker for 30 years, right? Mm-hmm. And I have lied to myself first and foremost, but to everybody in my life for 35 years. I've just been a compulsive liar in the pursuit of maintaining this self-medicating, approach to my own demons. And so Miserere was a journey into my own hell, and the hell that I shared with my brother, and his specific hell, which was a deeper circle of hell, if we want to look at it that way, than mine. And as this started, so did the increase in my drinking. And that increase was not acceptable to my ex. She, at first, just noticed, like, okay, one day she finds me passed out on the back porch. After she goes to bed, I get up and keep drinking. That kind of stuff is where it started. Mm-hmm. And then the pursuit of this project takes me deeper and deeper and deeper into an kind of unraveling spirit. And I'm starting to hide alcohol all over the house, so that like if I have to go to the bathroom to increase my consumption of alcohol, hidden behind the detergents that clean the tub is a bottle of wine. And there's bottles of wine hidden in all over the house now, so that I can continue to push this from 2 bottles to 3 bottles, and 3 bottles to 3.5 bottles. And then the blackouts started. During the production of the Miserere, I started having blackout nights. I had nights where I was waking up on the floor of the bathroom. And of course, all along, I'm trying to function for the sake of the Miserere. Like, I didn't care. And I lied to myself and said that it was all for the Miserere, and the Miserere deserves my own peril. It deserves my self-destruction. It deserves, if I die on this cross, I deserve to die on this cross, because it's all for the art, which, granted, is there value in that? Maybe beyond myself, but certainly not for myself and the people that love me. And so the Miserere takes from June until December to finish. And there was a period in the middle where I reached 57, and I finished 57, the 57th panel of my Miserere, which, as I said, is the last plate that Rouault finished. Oh. And I had this crisis moment of about 2 weeks where I was paralyzed. I was certain I shouldn't go on past 57 because he didn't. From an art historical perspective, I grappled with that, and finally I thought to myself, no, there's more. I have 100 sketches. I have 100 sketches. I want the 100 sketches. And he had 100 sketches, and he wanted the 100 sketches. And for mental health awareness, and for the life and the death, and for whether it's for the honor or the dishonor, I knew I should not. If I live to make 100, I should make 100. And in that decision, I think in my way, I decided that I might drink myself to death. I look back and I think, let me drink myself to death, and perhaps in my sick mind romantically not finish 100. Why should I be allowed to finish the 100 if Rouault wasn't allowed? And that was the break. The beginning of the very end was sometime around November. By this point, blackouts are increasing. I don't remember what's happening. Fights are getting worse with my ex. I fall off all of my social responsibilities. I'm falling asleep in Twitter spaces, hosting spaces, drunk. It's becoming a devastating for my functional approach to life at this point. By November, my girlfriend at the time, let's just call her my girlfriend. I even hate the word ex, but irregardless, if she's my ex, it's my fault. But she is begging me, John, to get it under control. And I'm literally telling her, yeah, whatever. Because I am now committed to drinking myself to death. So the Miserere comes to an end. I finish 100 just before Christmas, and just before my kids come home to visit me. And I'm now full blown 3 to 4 bottles a night, at least 3, mostly in secret, completely falling apart, starting to call off of work, lying about why, I get COVID, shit happens, whatever. But now this half of the year that has been devoted to my undying love for my brother. Okay. My Miserere of undying love had a secret that he was a pedophile, an abuser, on himself molested by 3 separate men on 3 separate occasions in his childhood. So I know he was sick, and my sister said he was sick. We all knew he was sick. He was traumatized as a child to the nth degree. And I also found out on that same night that my daughter told my sister and my ex, my girlfriend, that when I was in rehab, my brother was sleeping with my ex-wife. So I can't, the convoluted emotional distress that started raining down after Christmas, in the context of what I had just been through on behalf of my love for my brother, broke me in 2.
Yeah, I can imagine. Well, I can't imagine, but
it's
definitely broke your heart, right? All that emotion poured into that. Not just that project, but ever since, ever since he passed away, I've been mourning that. And then you find out that he wasn't the guy who you thought he was.
He wasn't. And so this week, 10 days ago, I just spiraled, long story short, got to the point of daily blackouts, woke up on a Monday, 10 days ago-ish, right? 2 weeks ago, whatever.
Mm.
A week, 2 weeks ago tomorrow. And she's crying and she tells me, I can't do this anymore. You have to go. You have to go. You've broken me. You've taken everything from me. The man I fell in love with is dead. It's dead to me. You're dead to me. Go get better.
Mm.
And then I come to the Airbnb, which brings me to this week, Monday. I decided on Sunday of last week, I was going to drink myself to death. I was done. I wanted to die. I had had enough. And this was it. And so I bought what I thought was enough wine to kill me with alcohol poisoning, and drank as much wine as fast as I could, in between passing out, waking up, drinking it again as fast as I could, praying that at one point I would reach that limit of consumption that I would never wake up.
Wow.
And that's what happened. And I woke up on the 4th. I can't even think of the days right now. I woke up on the 4th after all that transpired, as we opened the story with, on the 3rd. And desperately realized that there's only one choice that sees me live, because drinking that's where I'm at in my darkness, in my miserere. I'm at that point where my next drink will be the last day, very likely the last day of my life. And so, in a panic and through almost constant anxiety for the last 48 hours, I've been going to meeting after meeting after meeting for an hour's, a feeling of being safe for an hour at a time. And
How's your relationship with your son?
amazing.
Right? Like, this is really bad right now, but I guess it's come up now and then, right? You have mental issues, but you know how much that would fuck up your kids if you died, right? Like, just repeat the whole process over again. It's so tragic.
Sober, I know that.
Mm.
Drunk, I don't care.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so much chaos in my heart and in my head that surviving that becomes increasingly impossible the more I drink. Because what alcohol for me does is amplify whatever is the loudest emotion. Happiness hasn't been the loudest emotion in my life since I was a kid. So the loudest emotion that alcohol amplifies is never joy. It's never calm. It's never happiness. It's never serenity. It's never satisfaction. It's never self-esteem. It's never confidence. It's never nothing. There's never a light in the bottom of that glass. But I have, through a grave lack of self-love, a lack of self-appreciation, self-awareness, maybe, preferred the self-hate and the self-doubt, because it seemed more real, seemed more honest to be gravely fucked up, because I don't have any life experience that isn't fucked up. I don't have any life experience that allows me to believe that there's a rainbow or a pot of flowers in my creative future. You know, I tried to make a pot of flowers the other day, and, you know, I hated it. I hated it. A lot of people loved it. I thought it was stupid. What the fuck am I painting flowers for? I can't paint flowers. I can't paint light.
That's interesting about the alcohol.
Can we take a break for a second?
Sure.
Cut this. I just have to use the bathroom.
Okay.
I need a moment to gather my thoughts here.
It's interesting what you said about the alcohol, because I drink a fair bit myself, and usually it makes me happy. But I guess what you're saying is it's more like an excuse for feeling the way you do. Am I reading that right?
I think excuses is a big part of it. I think there's a real mental health component. There's a real sense of there's a real self-destructive component.
Yeah.
You know, that's, you know, to choose against the will of the people that love you, and to choose to knowingly hurt the people that love you. First of all, that's cruel. And second of all, it requires a kind of apathy that you either are that cruel, or that there's a way of manufacturing your own, you know, tolerance of being cruel. And what pushes me to that tolerance of cruelty, which it is cruel to be apathetic to those people that love you, is the need to drink. And that need to drink, is it self-medicating? I don't know. I believe so. Is it a way of escape? I don't think so, because what am I escaping from? I mean, I'm escaping from a world where people love me into a world where I hate myself. So there has to be some relationship there to the hating of oneself.
It's deep, man. For me, it's an escape. It's an escape usually to deal with the boredom and the feeling that I'm trapped and I'm never going to be able to do what I want to do before I die. And when I smoked a lot, I mean, smoking is not that bad, but I was thinking, you know, it's just a slow way to kill myself. But I never, again, like you say, you know, I wasn't really thinking about how much it would hurt my family. I guess I was selfish, or I felt that I just was enslaved to helping. This a while ago, but yeah, it sounds pretty bad. And I know how fucking hard it is to not drink when I want to drink. There's a convenience store like literally 3 minutes away on foot, and it's always open. It's just like, but if I decide in my head I don't want to, then I don't, you know, but I can't control it that well. It's just state of mind. So for you, like you've been through this before. What's that?
Yeah, I have lost all control over it. I can't. I mean, at least right this second, I just need a safe place where I hear people talk about why I should, as encouragement, as a life buoy, you know, like because I know if I open one more bottle of wine, it might be my last day.
Yeah.
I just really know that. The only reason I'm not dead is because I didn't drink enough to kill myself, and I thought I was going to. I wanted to. I drank as much as I could, probably because I'd only drink red wine. Well, maybe red wine's not the best alcohol to kill yourself. I guess I lucked out in that way.
Yeah.
You know, maybe if I was drinking whiskey, I'd be dead.
Yeah.
But I wanted to die. That's all I can admit. You know, I didn't care if I died. I hoped I would not wake up on the 3rd. I wanted to die on the 3rd.
To join your brother.
Yeah, so I could beat his ass.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I don't take back the Miserere. It's no less important to me for what I learned than for what I went into it and went through it for. Mm-hmm. Because I know that it was as much for my own mental health journey as it was for a survey of his. And at the end of the day, it is a journey for mental health awareness. And that is what matters to me, is that it was a journey for mental health awareness, for addiction recovery, for, the battle with addiction, for, the existentialist concern, is there a God? Is there not a God? What is God? Death, suicide prevention, self-hate, self-loathing, self-abuse. It's all in there. Rape, molestation, pedophilia, murder. It's all in there. It's all in there because it was all in my life. So I can't say that I regret the Miserere. I just think, God damn it. I just hate that I didn't have that as part of my awareness. I still would have gone into the Miserere with those same revelations, but I would have maybe had there might have been 2 or 3 panels dedicated to it. I mean, I might even have an amendment to the Miserere if I haven't really sketched that out, but I feel like there might even need to be an amendment of plates, amendment of panels that speak to the revelations and speak to the complexity of what those revelations mean to the Miserere in general. So I don't know, but it has occurred to me.
It's a good idea. Yeah. Not the whole set, but yeah, I'd imagine there's 10 or 20 that you could redo or edit.
Well, I don't think I would edit any. I would just amend the collection to 105 or 107 or however many it took to include these revelations and how they impact the works. I don't regret a single work. I wouldn't change a single work.
No, they're all beautiful. But I mean, like you say, they're based on the revelations. I'm sure you have a different feeling now than you did when you were making them. Some of them.
Yeah. A little bit. There's so much rooted in an awareness of sickness that I don't think that idea of Kierkegaard's sickness unto death, to me, that sickness unto death is what Miserere is about. It's about sickness unto death, because I am a sick man. Mm-hmm. In the most sort of clinical sense, I suffer from PTSD, and the symptoms of PTSD are exacerbated by drinking, and alcoholism is a disease of the mind. And so I have these diseases of the mind and disorders of the mind, and they collide, mm-hmm. and they push each other to the cliff's edge in different ways.
Yeah.
So
next steps? Just wondering how I can help you out. So your son and you are getting along well, right?
My son is my beacon of light right now. He's calling me every day. Mm-hmm. He's actually coming to meet me today at 11. So actually I'm going to keep this short with you today. Mm-hmm. But yeah, he's coming to visit me with his girlfriend at the Airbnb.
Sweet.
And next steps for me, a recommitment to you. I need to reorganize myself, and I need to get back into a mindset that will enable me to engage effectively with our guests. Mm-hmm. And over the last 3 months of exodus from this show, It has been an exodus driven by a complete inability to engage intelligently with guests, always being distraught. I would not have wanted to, certainly not wanted to, bring that to the show. I didn't want that to be part of our legacy of work together. So I couldn't work with you. And, today I just wanted to have this conversation because I don't want to start this next chapter of my life. And I hope it's a chapter. I really do, if not a couple, that I don't want to start off the chapter on a lie. I want to start off the chapter on a truth, an absolute truth. And that truth is that I am sick and that I need to reclaim my health, and that is going to take a serious amount of work, but I'm going to do it one day at a time. And I'm rehabbing right now. And, the work will continue, but the work will continue both in the studio, in the mind, in the heart, in the soul. There'll be much work to do. And I want to do that work. And so I have my son at 11, and I have my meeting at 1. My next meeting is at 1. And yeah, so maybe if I may need one more weekend without engaging with guests. I really think I want to have a few 3-4 weeks of sobriety, so that I really feel stable. But
yeah, you do what you want to do, but I think it'd be good to have some momentum and routine. But whatever, let me know. I understand either way.
Talk about it throughout the week. You might be right, and I might agree. I just want to make sure that there's a disclaimer on the record here. Only because I am literally 48 hours sober and still suffering from some of the bodily effects of that. And, I don't feel right. There's a lot going on, but that will dissipate quickly over the next week. So it very well may be possible I'll be ready to do something on Saturday. I just wanted you to know that where I stand today, I may need another week, but we'll see.
Okay. Yeah, well, enjoy your time with your son in the meeting, and thanks for telling me what happened. I never knew what was going on exactly. Of course, how would
Nobody
I?
did.
But yeah,
lied to you.
It makes sense.
I lied to everybody else, man. All I've been doing for the last 6 months is lying. Lying about my health anyway. Lying about why I'm not here and why I'm not there and why I'm doing this and not doing that. I've been lying to everybody. So you're in a big group of people that are waking up to a bit of a shock.
Well, it's forgivable. I'm happy you're back on track. Brighter days ahead, I hope.
Me too.
Yeah. What are you working on these days? Are you working on a project or?
I have quite a few things in mind. I started a series. I've started a few different series. Intermittently, though, there have been a lot of self-portrait sort of styled, abstract, figurative kind of developments that I'm, always interested in the portrait, because the portrait, whether it's a self-portrait or a portraiture in general, allows me to think about the aesthetics of human suffering or the aesthetics of psychology and mental health, as a component of the aesthetic, like to, poeticize through aesthetic choices and through aesthetic searching, what it might look like to feel this way or to feel that way, or to be going through this or to be going through that. And of course, these are very personal choices and personal perceptions about, what it looks like, but that feels incredibly important to me. So that's always part of my daily process. Is this a day where I need to do a portrait? This week I've done several portraits, mostly very, very dark, around the experience. I said there was the portrait that I made called the Suicide Note 1 of 2. I made that in a blackout. I minted that in a blackout, and I was not aware at all that I even made it until the 4th. So that piece I actually burned because in my disarray on the 4th, I woke up and it was part of that like realization of all the things I had done. And so in a moment of terror, I burned it, and I may remint it. I had received actually, it was so strange. I received today. I noticed that I had a DM on Twitter from a collector who said, I don't understand. I've been trying to buy the Suicide Note 1 of 2, but it keeps giving me a transaction error, and it's because I burned it.
Yeah.
And I said to him, I said, well, let me think about it, and maybe I'll remint it. And if I do, I'll just remint it and, private sale to him. But, it kind of represents a really dark day and a really dark moment in my life. And, but we'll see. I might actually mint that for him, but if he's still interested. But yeah, so, that was a portrait of my brother. Well, portrait of my thoughts on my brother that was awful to look at. I actually can't hardly look at it, but and then I made, there was a portrait that I made, and I didn't know what I wanted to do with it. And it was about a week ago, maybe a week and a half ago. And it was just, it was sitting, and I've been thinking about it. And I realized that it was sort of like me right before the week of blackout. And so I went back into it and reworked it and made it blackout 2/3/22, a reclamationist history. In that piece, I don't know if I'll mint it, but that's a recent work. But in general, though, as far as projects, it's hard to say, because I don't know from day to day what I need, and I work out of what I need emotionally and psychologically. It's never, my process as far as making art doesn't even begin with, the idea of a movement or the idea of, participating in art is not really what it's about. It's about participating in the life's journey of mental health. So the works, the series, anything always comes back to process and how I process through that, the mental health component. I have a very big interest in a series called Monoliths, which I put up my first monolith that sold. I have a second monolith that I may mint. And they start with a palette knife painting process on paper. And so that, and I actually went out and bought the art paper that I need. And I picked up some paints and stuff because I didn't have anything with me at the Airbnb. So I'm actually now able to start working on monoliths. The first 2 were made before I was kicked out of the house as I was thinking about this project. And so, yeah, so that's a really big interest for me because there's something about their weight, their gravity, and the way in which, moving into digital, taking something from the analog into the digital is really precious to me. Because so if I can bring the painterly aesthetic from the works on paper, bring those in and then go into them with the metal works as palette and texture, it actually creates something entirely different in sort of feel than building something entirely out of metal. Right. So all the work that I've done over the past year has been kind of built entirely out of metal. But these monoliths are coming in, starting with actual painting, and then coming into being taken a step further with the metal. And yeah, So that's something I'm interested. But I would say, other than the portraits and the monoliths right now, and the possibility in the near future of diving back into the Miserere for the amendment to it, that's what I have at the moment.
Sounds good. Sounds good, man. Okay. Well, thanks a lot, Henry, for catching up. And hopefully next week, if not, maybe the week after, we can have another show. And in the meantime, stay in touch, eh?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for the opportunity today.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay. Take care.
Night, brother.